summary, what if Sally Jackson, long before she met Poseidon and had Percy, had attracted the attention and love of an immensely strong Primordial? What if that Primordial was drawn to her by mere chance after one simple meeting that grew over time? What if he left her side for several years to deal with his domain, promising to return when he was done? She thought he would never return, as that's how she figured out the gods were like, they were fickle and always exiting the lives of mortals. But what she didn't know, until he did return, was that Naruto Uzumaki always keeps his promises and won't let anything get in his way. Naruto x Sally Jackson. Primordial. Naruto challenge by Memnon 45. Primordial's Queen Chapter 1. She remembered all too well as the familiar dream played through her head, it being as if Morpheus was toying with her by showing her everything. Though she figured he was more replaying her memories as she watched the events and memories she had with the man she couldn't and wouldn't dare forget about. The dreams and memories she was having were of a man she met and fell in love with long before she ever met Poseidon, and he too was a god. Though calling him a god was a bit of an insult. He, her first full-blown love, was a primordial as old as the universe, even though he took the form of a mid-20-year-old man. The name he went by was Naruto Uzumaki, and he was the Shinto primordial of creation, energy, nature, peace, honor, and oaths. His appearance, according to him, had always been the same, with his other forms being alternate forms he took for combat. His spiky blonde hair was as gold as the sun and defied gravity, with two spiky bangs that framed his tan-skinned. His face had 3 unique whisker-like marks on each cheek, giving him the appearance of a cat or fox of some sort that he said he wore because of his animal form he often took. His eyes were a crystal clear sapphire blue that always seemed to sparkle whenever she looked at them, or when he wore the same fox-like smile that also enhanced his whiskers. For so long in her life, since her Uncle Rich had died, he had been there for her. She still wasn't sure how she had attracted his eye, but ever since she had met him that fateful day, she had known deep down that she truly loved him. It was something about how she felt so at peace around him and safe that made her attracted to him, and his immensely down-to-earth personality and sweet charms that made her fall for him. To this day she still didn't know how she got him to fall in love with her. She giggled softly as she remembered how shocked and confused she had been when he confessed to her before he silenced her with a soft and gentle yet passionate kiss that she had melted into. Her time with him after that was amazing, though like all things, it had to come to an end. She remembered that one day more than any other, as it was when he said goodbye. It was during one of their dates, a moonlit picnic in a stunningly beautiful forest, when it happened. Just as they were sharing a dance under the moon, which was glowing so bright above them, almost like a spotlight, when an odd black crow with an even odder red eye landed on his shoulder and whispered something into his ear. Once it went away, she clearly saw how torn up he was as he told her that he had to go deal with someone who was trying to hunt down his sacred animals. The crow was a messenger from one of his students that they had sent over from his pantheon and his world to warn him. At first she was afraid, after all he was the only consistent thing she had in her life, but he made her a promise that eased her worries, since he was the god of oaths. He swore that he would return, even going as far as to give her a green crystal necklace asterisk that he said was a symbol of his, to prove how serious he was. But as he made his promise, he asked her to promise something as well to him that confused her a bit. Simply, he asked her to continue to live and not to just wait around for him, since with the time difference between realms it might take a decade or so before he could return. At first she didn't want to promise him that, since he was the only one she could see herself with, but it turned out he asked her to do this because he was afraid. Since he was a god, the lives of humans went by rather fast. The last thing he wanted was for her to wait for him and the time difference between worlds screw him over by bringing him back several decades after he left, making her wait her whole life for him when she could have been living it while waiting for his return, where he would then make her immortal. The only reason he couldn't back then was due to her still being younger than he wanted her to be. He wanted her to live a human normal life before he essentially took it away by giving her immortality. It was only after she agreed did he leave for his realm, though not before they finished their date and spent an amazing night together. He ended up leaving the next morning, where he parted with her after a passionate kiss, promising to return as soon as he could. After that her life slowly went back to normal as it could be after being in a serious relationship with a primordial. That was until Poseidon came and more or less swept her off her feet, leaving her with her son Percy, who she loved dearly. Being with Poseidon, even though she did have strong feelings for the Greek god, couldn't compare to being with Naruto. It was even hard bringing herself to be intimate with the god as Naruto's face kept popping into her head, but his words kept replaying in her head to continue living, even if it meant loving another for however long he was gone. She didn't regret her time with Poseidon as it gave her Percy, but she could tell Poseidon wasn't as serious about her as Naruto was. In the end she didn't mind, since she would always hold out and wait for the man she loved. She was then moderately surprised as the replaying of her memories stopped and she was frozen in place as a set of arms wrapped around her from behind. The second the arms were around her she knew who it was, but she could not turn around, as if a force was holding her in place. "Soon, my love. I am returning to you soon, just like I promised," the figure spoke as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes, but before she could respond she was jolted awake and bolted upright in her bed. Sally could only smile brightly as she wiped the tears coursing down her cheeks, unable to stop them, as she desperately hoped this wasn't Morpheus messing with her or something. She didn't know if she could handle the false hope. She though could only sigh as she realized what time it was before she got dressed and could already hear Gabe calling out for food. The only reason she was with that walrus of a man, if she could count tricking him missed illusions being with him, was so that his scent could mask Percy's and keep her and him safe. He was the only man she could find with a pungent and thick enough scent to mask Percy's strong demigod scent that came with being the son of Poseidon, one of the big three. "I'll start breakfast soon, Gabe. Just hold on," she yelled as she picked up the green gem necklace of Naruto's that she only ever took off when she went to bed. She couldn't help but smile as she looked at the picture of her and Naruto back when she had just started college, back when she was 21. She was a bit nervous since she had aged over the 25 years he had been missing and worried if he would still find her attractive. Her long brown hair had gained streaks of gray and her body had matured and aged due to carrying Percy for 9 months and giving birth to him. Before she could stress over her figure anymore she quickly shook her head and continued to get ready, since her son was returning home today and she had to get their trip to Montauk ready. There was no way she was going to spend her full day here, as with that dream starting out her day, she was going to make sure it continued that way. Though, as the day had passed and she now found her driver's side door wedged in mud with the car roof cracked open by a bolt of lightning, she realized her luck had been put in the hands of Nemesis and Nautic. I can't die here or let my son die," she thought with a groan as she looked towards her son. "Percy, we have to," she started to say before her voice faltered and, illuminated by a flash of lightning, she made out the figure of something she wished she never would have the misfortune of meeting, the Minotaur. "Who is, Percy? Get out of the car," Percy started to say before she interrupted him and urged him out of the car, throwing herself against her door. Once she realized there were only two ways out, through the cracked open roof that was sizzling and smoking, not safe, or the passenger side door that was closer to the Minotaur. "Climb out the passenger's side. Percy, you have to run." "Do you see that big tree?" she asked as she looked her son in the eye as she pointed up the hill towards the tree on the border of camp. "That's the property line. Get over the hill and you'll see a farmhouse down in a valley. Run and don't look back, yell for help but don't stop until you reach the door," she said, her son looking at her in confusion and worry. "Mom, you're coming too," he said as she shook her head. "He doesn't want us, he wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line," she said before she turned to keep her eyes on the Minotaur as it almost waited for Percy to leave. She would be damned if she was going to let her son die. "We're going together. Come on, Mom," Percy urged as he climbed across Grover and pushed the door open into the rain. "I told you, Mom. I am not leaving you." "Help me with Grover," she said before Percy interrupted her with a pleading command that she simply nodded to and moved over and out of the car. Together they draped Grover's arms over their shoulders and started to stumble uphill through wet waist-high grass. She frowned as Percy turned and looked towards the Minotaur, the moon shining above them as if to illuminate the scene. "That's Pasiphae's son," Percy said before she finished for him, not wanting him to say its name. "I wish I'd known how badly they want to kill you," she said with a frown, as if Hades or whatever god had sent the Minotaur after them. Then Percy was definitely on some god's hit list. "But he's the Min, don't say his name. Names have power." She quickly stopped him, not wanting it to get stronger by uttering its name. She frowned at the distance between them and the tree, at least 100 yards, with the Minotaur only about 50 feet behind them. "Food," Grover moaned before Percy covered his mouth gently. "Mom, what is he doing? Doesn't he see us?" Percy asked as they slowly continued up the hill. "His sight and hearing are terrible. He goes by smell, but he will figure out where we are soon enough, so keep moving," she said before she held in a curse as, if almost on cue, the Minotaur roared and picked up Gabe's Camaro by its roof and threw it down the road for about half a mile. It kept skidding, a trail of sparks showering behind it before it exploded from the sparks igniting the gas tank. She frowned as, with its main source of their smell gone with the car, as well as Gabe's scent no longer camouflaging them, it would quickly smell them out. "Percy, when he sees us he'll charge. Wait until the last second then jump out directly sideways out of the way. He can't change directions very well once charging. Do you understand?" she asked while Percy frowned before taking a quick look from the Minotaur and then back to her. "How do you know all this?" he asked as she sighed, frowning sadly as she held Naruto's necklace in her free hand. "I've been worried about an attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish keeping you near me. I thought I would be able to keep someone I loved close to me without them leaving or being taken away," she said as she shook off her tears and refocused on what was happening now. "Keeping me near you? What do you?" Percy asked before the beast behind them roared and the color from her face flushed out as she heard the Minotaur tromping its way uphill. "He had smelled us. Go, Percy. Separate. Remember what I said," she yelled, pulling Grover off of her son's shoulder so he could run unburdened. Her heart leapt to her throat as her son ran forward with the Minotaur quickly charging towards him. She waited, frozen in fear as the Minotaur charged towards her son, before Percy quickly dodged him only for him to change direction towards her. She didn't even have to think twice before she set down Grover and started to run downhill. "Run, Percy. I can't go further, but you and Grover can. Just run," she yelled as if she was trapped behind the border with this. Then she was going to make sure it didn't get its hands on her son. As she saw the Minotaur charge her, she tried to leap to the side, to buy Percy more time, only for it to have seemingly learned its lesson with Percy, since its hand quickly grabbed her by the neck and rose her up. "Go," she yelled as she struggled, trying to kick him or do anything as she dangled in the air before she closed her eyes and thought back to Naruto. She was able to ignore the pain of being strangled as she smiled, remembering the dream and his voice she heard earlier today. "I'm sorry, Naruto, it seems I couldn't keep myself safe until you got back," she whispered before she heard the Minotaur roared in pain and she felt herself starting to fall. Her descent was stopped as she landed in a pair of arms. "Are you okay, my Haim?" the man whose arms she landed in asked as she widened her eyes, her vision blurry from the lack of oxygen, before tears built up in them. "And Naruto?" she asked as a pair of familiar blue eyes stared down at her. "Of course, my Haim, but right now you need to rest. You are bleeding and hurt. Please stay here while I deal with the beast that dared to hurt you," he said, his voice becoming angry near the end before he gently set her down and kissed her forehead. "Take a look after Sally while I deal with this brood," he said, talking to seemingly no one before a black-cloaked man suddenly appeared beside her. "Of course, Naruto-sensei," the man said as Naruto nodded, pulling up the golden katana from the ground, which Sally noticed had no hole from the sword, before he sheathed it and drew the silver one from his waist. She was in shock as she saw her former lover in front of her again while he stared down the golden injured bleeding Minotaur that was still roaring in pain. To him the only thing that seemingly changed was his outfit and the two katanas on his hip. He wore around her he now wore a full-length haori that was a golden-orange color that had black megatama around its collar with black lines running through it. The rest of his outfit was a pair of black jeans, a pair of wooden sandals, and an orange long-sleeved shirt before finishing it off with a black sash to hold the two swords he wore on his left side. And, Naruto's Kurama mode cloak's coat only made of cloth and not energy, the first sword, the one he had drawn before, was sheathed in a soft red sheath and had a red cloth handle as it seemed to be made out of some kind of golden metal. The second one, the one he had drawn now, had a cold blue sheath and had a matching blue cloth handle while it was made out of a silver metal. I am sorry I didn't arrive sooner, Sally, I truly am, but some brat claiming revolution kept me held back that I had to leave someone else to deal with, he said as he looked back to her, not caring for the Minotaur, but they both knew it couldn't harm him. It wasn't until the Minotaur roared again, charging toward him, did Naruto swing his sword, with this time having it effortlessly cleave the Minotaur in half and dispelling the beast into a cloud of golden dust with two horns left behind as trophies. Itachi, pick up the trophies and the unconscious satyr and help the boy near the hill up to the camp, Naruto said as he sheathed his sword, eyes only looking towards Sally before he crouched down in front of her while Itachi silently followed orders, not wanting to ruin the moment. My Hime, it is so good to see you again, he said as he stroked her cheek before she held his hand against her cheek, not allowing his hand to move anymore. I knew you'd come, Naruto, she said with tears in her eyes before she passed out from the exhaustion that caught up with her from the crash to the Minotaur, almost choking her out. Naruto POV, I'll always come for you, my love. For now just rest and we can talk later, he whispered while he gently picked her up, kissing her forehead softly again while he was just glad to be back by her side again. Hey. Who are you two? The boy he knew as Sally's son Percy yelled out as he understood his confusion and wariness from everything that just had happened. He was a bit unsure how to take the fact the woman he loved had a son with another man, a Greek god no less, but if he was Sally's then he was special to him as well. That, and he had told her to continue living. It's okay, Percy, I'm an old friend of your mother's and Itachi is a student of mine. Let us help you get up to camp so you, your friend, and your mother's injuries can be treated, he said as he crouched down to Percy's level, his mom still in his arms before the boy slowly nodded before Itachi put a hand on his shoulder and Percy passed out under an illusion. Thank you for that, Itachi, but do be careful with carrying them, he said as Itachi had the satyr draped over his shoulder while draping Percy over the other one before his student nodded and started to follow him up the hill. As they passed the tree, ignoring the barrier that tried to keep Sally out, he frowned slightly at the arrows drawn towards them with a centaur and a man he felt a godly aura coming from. Is that really how you greet people who enter your camp searching for a safe haven and medical assistance after being attacked by a monster? He asked, lacing his words with the faintest hint of ki that got the demigods to shakily lower their bows. Stand down, the centaur said before he turned towards them. I am sorry, the boy here came up here yelling for help and we were on guard in case the beast reached the edge of the boundary, he added as Naruto rolled his eyes. Fine, but these three need medical attention as they were in a crash and the woman was nearly suffocated by the monster below. Do you have some place to lay them so they can be treated? He asked as the man with the godly aura nodded with a frown. Yeah, back there, he said pointing back to the farmhouse, though first who are you two and the people you are carrying? He asked while Naruto frowned, a bit annoyed at the gods wanting them to stop and explain themselves to him while they held three injured people. How about we explain this after we lay the three bleeding people down in that house as they again were injured in a car crash that was caused by a bolt of lightning mixed with the Minotaur, Naruto said, adding an edge to his voice as he was a bit testy due to holding the injured love of his immortal life in his arms. You really shouldn't say that name, the centaur said as he clenched his jaw and narrowed his eyes. Names may be damned right now as the woman I love is injured in my arms with her son and his friend on my student's shoulders. Let me lay them down, and this time it's not a request, he said as he flared a bit of his primordial aura, which caused the god and centaur to widen their eyes in a mix of shock and natural fear while the demigods around them backed up from them. Sensei, you're scaring the kids, Itachi said as he had noticed a few of the kids pass out until Naruto sighed and reined his aura back in. We are laying them down and then we can explain ourselves, Naruto said as he walked past the god and centaur with Itachi close behind. As he reached the house, he gently adjusted Sally in his arms before he opened the door and walked them inside and found the medic room, where he then laid all three of them down in three separate beds. Itachi, stay behind and look after them, make sure whoever comes to treat their wounds that they are aware that Sally is mortal and to heal her visible injuries before I heal the rest. I feel I might have to leave for a bit after I tell the god who I am, he said before Itachi nodded and sat down on an empty seat. Take your time, Sensei, if any of them wake up I will explain where you went and that you will be back, Itachi said as Naruto nodded and left the room, already frowning as he saw the god and centaur, who was now in a wheelchair, staring at him from the house's front door. Who in Tartarus are you? I don't exactly like being ordered around, the god said as the centaur sighed. I am sorry about Dionysus here, but we are just a bit shocked and confused at how you were able to bring in a mortal past the barrier as well as that display of an oppressive aura, the centaur said as the god, now identified as Dionysus, who he should have identified earlier from the smell of grapes on the man but only didn't due to him being a newer god, narrowed his eyes. Shut it, Chiron, and don't go spouting my name out like that. Now who are you and that dark-haired man before I drag you off to the Olympian Council to explain in front of them, he said as Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Honestly, that might be for the best, as I figure you will want to take me there anyways after I tell you, and I'd rather not repeat all of this again for all of them, he said before Dionysus only narrowed his eyes more and turned towards Chiron. Keep an eye on the black-haired man, I guess I have to call a council meeting, Dionysus said with a groan before he snapped his fingers and he and Naruto disappeared in a purple mist. Naruto sighed at gaudiness of the throne room and the enlarged height Dionysus took on his throne. Of course, while this wasn't his first interaction with the Greek gods, this was his first time seeing their meeting room of sorts. It didn't take long for the throne room to fill up with the various gods and goddesses of the council, and it took even less time for Zeus, who he knew from appearance well enough due to past sightings of the god, to start glaring at him as if he was an enemy. Dionysus, why have you called this meeting in these dire times, and who is this man? You should know that right now things are tense, Zeus said before sending a blatant glare towards Poseidon, who just ignored it. This man suddenly arrived at the camp out of nowhere just as a demigod, a satyr, and the demigod's mother arrived at camp, defeated the Minotaur and brought them all across the barrier with another man by his side. He refused to answer who he was, saying it'd be better to do it before all of you, the god of wine said before the other gods and goddesses looked his way. Once a certain moon goddess' eyes met his, she let out a gasp and shrunk down to normal size, shocking the entire council as she then proceeded to bow down on one knee before the man. Teacher, I am so sorry I did not recognize you sooner. Artemis said quickly, her head lowered in a deep bow, before Naruto crouched down and patted her shoulder. Artemis, now really isn't the time to bow, and I've told you many times you don't ever need to do that to me, he said as Artemis frowned and raised her head. Why didn't you tell me you were returning, she asked, the council still in shock from the man-hater goddess bowing to the seemingly random man. As he looked around he chuckled at the fainted Apollo, a curious-looking Athena with wide eyes, Poseidon who was merely rubbing his beard, a Dionysus who had spat out his Diet Coke, and a twitching Zeus who clenched his throne's arm rests. What in Tartarus is this? Zeus yelled in rage as the skies rumbled above them and he glared venomously towards him and Artemis. Artemis, why do you bow to this man? He roared before Artemis glared back, about to retort until Naruto held up his hand to stop her, deciding he didn't want a godly yelling match to go down. My name is Naruto Otsutsuki and I am the Shinto primordial equivalence to your chaos. I returned to this world to save the woman I love from the Minotaur after her car crashed from being struck by lightning, he said as he stared coldly towards Zeus, who glared back heavily before Hera cleared her throat. Why is a Shinto, a powerful primordial such as yourself, showing up and saving a demigod of ours? Hera said as she, unlike her husband, was not about to make enemies with the equivalent of chaos. That was just plain suicide. I've been involved in this universe since shortly after its creation, as Chaos came to me asking a bit of advice after I created my realm, and they even thanked me by letting me have a toehold in this world with Japan. As for why I helped the demigod, it was because they happened to be the child of the woman I love that she had while I left to deal with things in my realm, he said as Hera nodded and Zeus slammed his fist down on his throne's armrests. If she birthed a hero of our pantheon, then you should not be involved with her or the child, he yelled before he and the council, minus Artemis who was still bowing in front of him, struggled to keep themselves up under the oppressive force weighing down on them. Do not tell me what to do and do not yell, as I am a bit perturbed from having to deal with annoyances for the last few years in my realm, he said in a cold tone. Teacher, you are weighing on them too much, Artemis said as he chuckled and lifted off the pressure. Sorry, second time today that I've done that, but that's only because annoying gods have been yelling at me, he said as Zeus panted, struggling to catch his breath. Enough. Zeus, do not anger to Primordial. Poseidon yelled as he slammed his trident down and glared at his brother before taking a calming breath and turning towards Naruto. Now Naruto, if I may call you that, he said unsure until Naruto nodded. What exactly do you have planned now that you return to the realm to the woman you love, he asked as Naruto rubbed his chin in thought. I figured I'd stay by her side, and since she most likely would want to stay near their side at camp, I'll probably set up a house for her there, he said with a shrug of his shoulders as Zeus banged his fist on his throne. Absolutely not. She is a mortal and you are not of this pantheon, you have no rig. Zeus started to yell before Hera snapped her fingers and Zeus seemingly lost his voice, and Athena nodded with a sigh. Thank you, Hera, for that. Now father, it is not smart to drive away a primordial if he wants to live near our kids, Athena said before she turned towards Naruto. I am curious as to if you are just going to look after your lover's kid or possibly the others as well, Athena said with a chuckle as Naruto smirked. Are you trying to see if I am open to maybe looking after the camp as its guardian or director of sorts, he asked as he could easily see where the goddess of wisdom was going with it. Personally, I would not be adverse to the thought if you were to actually consider it. The idea of having a primordial look after and possibly train our demigods outweighs any issues I can think up, which are all minor ones, she said as he shrugged his shoulders. Honestly, it all depends on Sally, but with how she is I can see her liking the idea as it allows her son Percy to be safe and for her to stay by his side. Plus it wouldn't be the first time I taught someone in this world, he said, motioning his head towards Artemis who was still on one knee beside him. I am curious about that. How did you get the infamous man-hater to bow before you? Aphrodite asked with a smirk while she licked her lips, which only caused Artemis to glare heavily towards the love goddess. It is nothing like that, you harlot. Teacher here saved me and Apollo shortly after we were born. He had met up with my mother shortly after she went on the run from Lady Hera and killed the snake that hunted us. He stayed behind and trained us to defend ourselves. He is the reason I took up my bow and became a master of it, she said as she glared towards her just waking up brother. By my holy cows, it really is you. I honestly didn't recognize you after so long, Apollo said, a bit embarrassed as Naruto waved it off with a chuckle, since while Apollo was a student of his, Artemis was more diligent in the sense of staying in touch with him. Personally, if he is that good of a teacher, I have no qualms against him being camp director in Dionysus' place, as he is unbound by our laws regarding our children or even his eventual children, Hera said as she, and the others ignored the rumbling sky and the angered-looking Zeus. I saw we put this to a vote, Dionysus said hurriedly, hoping this would finally get him out of his stupid punishment and pass it on to someone who actually wants to be there. I second that. It would benefit us immensely in the long run, Athena said while Hera nodded as with Zeus muted she was next to lead the votes. Those in favor? Hera asked as she, Athena, Hermes, Apollo, Artemis, Poseidon, Dionysus, Demeter, and Hephaestus rose their hands. Those against? Zeus yelled, his voice finally returning before he and Ares rose their hands. Those indifferent, Hera said as Aphrodite rose her hand, disinterested in it all after the possible drama with Artemis turned up to be nothing. Then the motion goes through. We the council approve of Naruto Otsutsuki becoming Camp Half-Blood's new director. Chiron will still be your aide if that is all right with you, Hera said, ignoring the upset-looking Zeus. Whatever, council dismissed, and I don't want to be called again unless one of you knows where Poseidon hid my bolt. Zeus yelled before he disappeared in a strike of lightning with the other gods, save for Hera, Athena, Artemis, and Poseidon leaving after him. Naruto did chuckle as Dionysus let out a loud cheer before he disappeared, most likely to pack up his stuff and get back to his palace. If you need anything, I'm sure either myself or Athena can help. Feel free to offer us a message through fire to ask us to drop by if need be, Hera said as Athena nodded. I would like to talk more about the history of yours and Chaos friendship of sorts, but that can come later as I figure you will be busy the coming days with getting settled, Athena added before they both flashed away. I will visit later, teacher, and have my hunters visit soon as well, as they too miss you. I would also love to meet Sally in person for once, so I might say hello then as well, Artemis said with a smile as she stood up from her bow with a smile. That sounds great, as I'm sure Sally would enjoy meeting you. Do take your time, as I know you are busy with your hunts and I wouldn't want you letting something dangerous get away on my account. Though I might ask you to track some things down for me later if you don't mind, he said as Artemis adamantly shook her head. Of course I don't mind. If you need anything, just ask, teacher. I will be sure to drop by after my next hunt. Artemis said with one last bow before disappearing in a silver flash of light, leaving him alone with Poseidon. As he turned towards the god of the sea, he couldn't help but smile a bit at the god's nervous expression. So Sally and her son Percy, that wouldn't happen to be who I think they are, he said as Naruto nodded and crossed his arms. Yeah, but I'll keep your secret for now, but you will have to claim him and reveal it in time, and not just as a ploy to have him find Zeus's bolt. Claim him because you are proud, not because he can be useful. I'll look after him and train him, but don't worry, you are his dad if you make sure to make it clear to him, he said as Poseidon nodded with a frown. Try and visit, I'll keep it hidden from everyone else and we can talk about this later. I need to check up on Sally and Percy, he said before Poseidon opened his mouth to say something but closed it and flashed away, leaving him alone in the throne room. Well, I'd better set things up at my new home of sorts. I do wonder how looking after a camp of demigods will sort itself out, he thought out loud to himself with a chuckle before disappearing into himself via Kamui. Chapter end.